one of the biggest things that we try to talk about when it comes to things like data and users is security. And yeah, most people are just like, yeah, whatever, security is just going to happen, whatever. That's not a big deal in the past. It is now. What were the stats that we saw during the keynote? Something like 80% of all intrusions used valid credentials on the network. We've seen like an 8x increase in the number of malware infections. I mean, the city of Atlanta got knocked out by a malware attack a week before Aruba Atmosphere this year, and they're just now turning their computers back on. But some of the things that we saw in the keynote kind of, there was hope for the future. I mean, Tim Capali actually made me believe in TPM chips again. Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that. But, what are some of the security enhancements that you've heard about at Aruba Atmosphere so far, whether it be device or user or software that kind of have you maybe hope for the future?
I think some of it is lessons that we've learned from like the crack incident and understanding how do we need to reevaluate what we look at from security going forward and what we're going to try to do with WPA v3 and how that's going to change things around. It's not fully ratified and fully out there yet, but certainly some of the aspects that they're looking at, trying to go from the model of you typically only encrypt the traffic that you care about and you don't encrypt any of the traffic you don't care about. So your guests are just kind of left out in the cold, which I'm somewhat of a fan of. They're kind of on their own, but the idea that we want to try to make it so that you are always operating in an encrypted state, but making it as easy as possible, because I'm sure many of you have gone to restaurants, bars, other organizations, coffee shops and such, and you get on site, hotels. You get on site and it's okay, let's play the Russian roulette game of how do I get on this network? Do I need to go find somebody for a pre-shared key? Do I need to jump through 11 steps to get my laptop on through something that's supposed to be fast? So I think the idea that if we can make security frictionless from the end user experience, and it kind of goes to what Joe Pine was talking about in his portion of the keynote the other day about we're getting from all the commodities and services, and now it's about the experience. And I know, not putting you on the spot there, Kevin, but you deal a lot with end user experiences through a lot of the sites that you operate through from where you're at, and we're the end users that are complaining that this is not simplified, but you've got a certain set of parameters you have to work towards, and they typically don't ever line up with what we want from end users, because it's all about legalese. So
let's actually, I want to pick one topic that you just talked about, and that's Passport. For those of you who weren't at Aruba Atmosphere, they actually did something really interesting. They turned up Passport and said, okay, if you have a cell phone on one of these carriers, when you walk in the door, your phone joins the network automatically. Now, some of the other devices that were not supported or that were not mobile, there were some more steps that needed to be done. But I'm a huge fan of this. Now, I have to joke. I spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and I travel around to a lot of different companies. And it's kind of a joke. I must have been here before because my laptop automatically joined the Wi-Fi. But what if that was something that you could do without having to have shown up there before? What if you could just email a link like Aruba did for us and say, click here, click this button, install the certificate, and when you show up tomorrow, everything's just gonna work. Is that something that you guys think is gonna be a huge deal for users?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think even more than just the click on the link and install the thing and it works. I didn't touch my device at all, and it didn't pick an SSID, didn't do anything, and it was just online. Not only was it online, it was securely online, and I think that's the thing. We've all seen, boxes or phones out of the box go, hey, you want to join it? I found an open network. You want to join it? It's not that experience. It's the, oh look, I have Wi-Fi bars and an IP address, and oh look, it's WPA authenticated. Like it's securely authenticated without user intervention at all. And I think that mechanism, it doesn't get any less friction than that. There are no captive portals, no user interaction, no nothing. And today it doesn't get any more secure than that.
But there's also triggered because the manufacturer of the phone and the whoever you signed up for your cell company had already preloaded the profile on the phone. What I was impressed with here is, as an enterprise, Aruba's acting as an enterprise, they linked into that. Something I've seen Passport, even Kevin's site, some of your airports I've been to, it's a carrier play. It has been for the last 5 years a carrier play. and it's finally shifting over to some enterprises can actually look at it. One of the things Tim mentioned, he had it in his lab in his house. And I think as we get to a point where we can lab up our own PassPoint portal that is working, it has a chance to move into that area. It's not ready yet, but it's getting pretty close.
I'd love to have a PassPoint portal labbed up for the day after Christmas when everybody comes in with their new junk that they got. And it's like, all right, guess what? It's all going to connect if you follow the links.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thoughts on this? Oh, Amy, what have you got?
I feel as though if you're challenged with user experience versus security, user experience wins every time.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. So I like this because you can put in some security and not affect that user experience much. So.
Yeah. How many times have we seen user experience win because your laptop just connected to something called Linksys? Because it just happened to be there. I mean, yeah, that's a huge deal. But security is more than just PassPoint.
One other thing, just to stay with the security, one of the things we saw in the technical keynote today was some of the role-based access control pieces that have been with Aruba forever on the wireless side. They showed a couple demos that it's also available on the wired side. You can unplug and plug in different devices into ports, and they will automatically follow that device across whichever port it's on, whichever jack it's actually plugged into. I was pretty impressed with that.
Now, and Keith brings up a really good point here because I'm an old wired guy, kind of like Ethan and Amy and John down there at the end of the table. And how hard is it to identify traffic on the other end of a wire? I mean, I think one of the reasons why Aruba's had such a great success with this is because they've spent so much time doing client identification. Whereas in the network world, we're like, I don't care, it's a device. And so when we try to bridge those two gaps, that's where it is. I mean, I've seen some stuff from Aruba where they're able to identify crazy things like security cameras or mobile payment terminals. And it's like, all right, if I see that, it gets a port profile, and I know. So people who have used their debit cards at places that got hacked later, the payment terminal system should never talk to the HVAC system under any circumstances. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to see more of. I want the system to at least have the intelligence to say in the keynote, if the security camera guy is plugging security cameras in just wherever he can find a port, don't make me go fix that port later.
Even better was that he plugged in a little Soho quality hub, a consumer grade hub, on the outside of a port and had multiple things plugged in and it could still figure it out.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what Amy said just a little bit ago. It's this balance between security and simplicity, right? And as a smaller organization with a smaller campus, it's a whole lot easier to turn off ports that aren't in use and turn on ports as they're needed and put them in the correct VLAN and do all of that manual configuration. But when you've got thousands of switches and tens and hundreds of thousands of endpoints, I mean, you're talking about full-time jobs for 10 people. It's not possible really to do that in a way manually, right? So you have to do it in an automated state.
I don't think it's so much of a scale factor from a size of the organization. I think it's just the way that we are shifting in our lifestyles and how we utilize our workspaces. Because I mean, doing port security for me, did a large company making consoles a few years ago. It wasn't so much about security. It was just about the hot swapping cubes and people constantly moving around. And it's not so much that I have 10 switches or I have 500 switches. It was more about just I don't want to have somebody have to call a help desk because every single day they could potentially sit in a different cube. We take that for granted on a wireless network because if I connect and I associate, who I am through my credentials systems, you're going to put me into the correct RBAC that I have. But if I go to a wired port, I don't have that. And we all, even though we love wireless, we all love the wired at times too, because we know that there's just, you wired when you can and wireless when you can't.
I love the wired.
I know you do.
It's just me. Sam.
I hate to be a pessimist about it all, but my concern is that we put so much reliance and so much faith into the systems that are automatically identifying.
No, you don't. You like being a pessimist.
You're right.
Okay.
These systems that are identifying things that are coming onto our network, and my concern is how hard is it going to be to spoof those things? How hard is it really going to be able to take and go, hey, I know what the security camera looks like, and I know what roles it has. I'm going to take this other box and pretend like I'm a security camera.
But didn't you see in the demo, did they actually actually showed, what if it's doing east-west traffic, we're still going to trap you.
For sure. But if you could get to a point where you could mimic those traffic behaviors, you're further complicating the exploits that may be necessary, which is going to make them all that much more difficult to track down when they.
Well, we've always known security is always I up you, you up me, up you.
Of course.
But it's the deadbolt lock problem.
Yeah,
it's like I can put a deadbolt lock on my house, and it's going to keep 95% of the people out. The 5% of the people it doesn't keep out, we're determined enough to defeat the security measure. So
or they're the people with keys, and that's another thing we have to look at is the people who are on the inside that have issues.
Yeah, what they're saying now is it's the inside that's actually the biggest problem, because we've built a big perimeter and everything on the inside is still kind of soft. And now we almost, I've written something about this on the Aruba Airheads community many years ago. We have to start looking at security like M&Ms. They have to be hard on the outside, all over the place, not just in the front, but kind of inside too. You can't trust your users anymore.
We never could.
We never could.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
So, Richard, you haven't had anything to say yet. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I was really excited about the dynamic segmentation that they talked about today, putting the cameras on the right VLANs. With the ClearPass integration, identifying that device, applying the right policy to it. The guy, Dan the man, moves the camera and bada bing, bada boom, it gets the right policy again. He plugs in his personal laptop, it gets everything correct, and that's the way it really should be, and that's kind of what the end goal is.
Now, having had a friend who's named Tim, who may have been responsible for infecting an entire network with Conficker because he joined an insecure laptop to a network. I mean, that's the kind of thing that talks to me. Tim talks to my friend Tim about being able to stop those kinds of disasters before they happen. So yeah, that idea is not just infrastructure devices; it's user client devices as well. I mean, that's a huge win for me being able to sleep at night. Tim being able to sleep at night. John.
Well, and so you're also kind of touching on another thing that they talked about in the technical demo today, which is the UEBA, the user and entity behavioral analytics, where we're looking at behavior of these things to see when something falls out of the norm of those behaviors. Mm-hmm. And can be really powerful as long as you're monitoring the right data and you're collecting and grabbing that stuff. But it's also a little bit scary in an Orwellian sense, because you're getting all this data, this personal data about people and things in your system, and you're storing it somewhere, which is frightening, just because how are you protecting that, and how are you protecting your users' privacy from
Facebook
and the man getting into your security system because he's a security tech, and being able to see the conversations of the CEO. At a high level, it's really powerful for the security organization, but there's a lot of questions I think need to be answered before you deploy it in your organization.
I'm almost positive that most of the security questions needed to be written before they were answered, not just, I hope we fix this problem. Jake.
The thing that I think impressed me about that particular demo, there was the user analytics, but it was the way, there wasn't just the super box that took care of all that for me. There was everything from the access layer switches and .1x and ClearPass to the Aruba OS CX, and it determining that something needed help, taking that up to Net Insight and say, hey, can you look into this a little further, because I think this is unusual. And it wasn't just I go buy the one product that takes care of all of these things for you. It was a lot of smaller products doing what they do well. And for me, I think that was really cool. That it reminds me of kind of the panacea of the IoT stuff, of all the little things that come together to form something bigger than the sum of the parts. And I like the fact that we're getting there. My only fear is that there's a lot of complexity to all the moving pieces.
And there's a separate UI for each of them.
Yeah. Well, to your point, it's awesome that we have so many different systems, because layered security is the way to go. Mm-hmm. The other side of the coin, though, is there's so many systems. Like all of those, it's great that all those systems have APIs and are talking to each other. It's so many systems. So somewhere you're going to have to automate that workflow, and the APIs will help with doing that. But it's so much data. Where do you start? And how do you know where to look first?
I'm intimidated by the fact that I have to know how all those pieces fit together. And I'm worried I'm going to make a decision in a policy someplace that I think is relatively minor, and expose something dramatically bigger than anything I had dreamt of. So that's my fear of that complexity, that I don't know that I can fit it all in my head at the same time.
That's a legitimate fear.
Because even though they're separate parts, now that they're all communicating via APIs, it's almost like even though they're these separate parts, they're still one big system.
Going back a little bit to what Blake said earlier, and kind of wrapping back around to WPA3, because that's something that's been discussed a little bit, and there's more to come here. But we've heard about it at WLPC, we've heard about it a little bit here. And Blake made an interesting comment that I'd never really considered this way, but he said, I don't really care about my guest users. But ultimately, at some point, Blake, your users are a guest on someone else's network. And that's when you do care about them, right? So as we continue to progress further, and as we get to a place where a guest user can come into a network and have end-to-end encryption or AP to client encryption, right, that no other guest user on that same AP can actually listen into. Now your user on their network is protected, which means outside of, again, going back to the whole lock thing, right? In general, that user is protected.
More protected.
I wouldn't say it's the appropriate protection, though, because who holds the keys? You don't hold the keys. We already have systems today. It's called automatic VPNs that get triggered when you're on a network other than your own.
Okay, but if...
that's the encryption I want.
Okay,
I control the keys.
But if it's open, if it's a completely open network with no encryption, you're telling me that auto VPN, there's nothing that can be done to intercept that?
Give a person time and you're going to be able to do anything, yes. But I think you're putting a false hope in that you're going to have encryption from something else. You control what you can control, and then you know when you can't control anything anymore. So I know that I can control how they connect from an external network because I can automatically trigger VPN to have to fire in order to hit any internal resources or any resources that I want to off of that. We've had that as part of systems for quite a while now. So my personal opinion is that's where I like to sit, and yeah.
Got a question from Mr. Robert Boardman.
So you guys, I like layered security. This is great. We're getting to this. Why are we not talking more about the actual problem and that's solving the training of our users to not?
Well, I think that was I think probably where you were going with WPA3, which is OWE is if you can get any level of improved security with no end user impact, no change to functionality, no needing to train people. The way you click and join a network is the same way you've always clicked and joined a network, but you just have another layer of security. I don't know that I don't know that I look at that as being defeatist. You're tricking them because you're saying you're more protected, and they're going to believe that they are just all protected. I think if you can get even a little bit of security out of some technology changes without having to retrain the end users, it's good.
I look at it like WPA3 is like the move to make all websites HTTPS all the time. It didn't really affect anybody because you just type in facebook.com and now instead of going to the insecure version, it goes to the secure version automatically. Is it making the web more secure? A little bit. It's not making it bulletproof, but it's still better than it was.
I disagree.
You disagree? Why do you disagree?
Because it's only encrypted until it hits the controller or hits the access point and goes from a frame to a packet. And you don't know what's going on that wired infrastructure. Just because I put you on, a NATed network, sorry, Tom, I know you had love-hate relationship with NATs, but just because you see that and the end user's not going to know where the heck they are.
But it's still better than
that person
open only. Where it was unencrypted over the wire and the wire.
If I have open only, that's again where I rely on the automatic triggers for VPN networks, because then I know for sure it's end to end to end to end all the way to my head end on my VPN. But
turning on OWE doesn't change your automatic VPN at all.
We don't know that yet, because depends on how the trigger profile is. If it sees that it's an encrypted network, does it still automatically fire? How do you have it set up on route applications?
But we're getting into details here that we really can't work out on this table. I would like to get back to your question there, Rob. My organization, I would say 6 months ago, ran some training. Basically don't click on links that, from emails that you don't know, that type of thing. Actually, first they did a test, and then they did training, And then they did a test again, a few months later. And I believe the take rate was still like 12%. So 12% of the organization clicked on a link that would have compromised credentials, even after training. And we're literally at a place right now where we are going to be testing on a quarterly basis, right? Trying to drive this home that you don't just click on links you don't understand. So I think there's training to be said, but I think I think anything that we can do to automate on the back end, anything that we can do to make things more safe, not safe, but more safe for the users at any given time, we should take those opportunities.
Okay, Blake,
It's quick. It's a quick one. JD, do you think that some of that is potentially due to the public cloud and the fact that it's basically an app is a flavor of the week? We keep switching between different apps, and a team might utilize this app today, and then next week they're like, oh, this other thing is great, let's start using this. So we're so used to constantly getting links in to say to sign up.
Actually, I think that's a valid point. The funny thing is I almost clicked on the link the last time, and the reason is because it was an email about an invoice. And there was a certain wireless line professionals conference that was sending invoices through a third party, and which is completely normal. That's a completely acceptable thing to do. And so on my phone, I saw it come through, and I said, well, daggone, I thought that was paid. I got to deal with this because that should have been paid, right?
So that's interesting.
And I pulled it up, and I got ready, and it went, no, that's not right? So I did double check, but I think there's something to be said there, right? There's so many other third-party providers that it is oftentimes easy to, accept that this should be normal.
The moral is replace your users with scripts that won't click on the link.
No more users?
No more users. There we go.
No more problems.
There you go.
And no more jobs.
Ask Tron how that works.
We'll get there eventually. All right.